Let's cultivate our motivation. So wherever you have sentient beings, you're going to have different ways of thinking. Different ideas, different opinions, different tendencies, different likes and dislikes. And as His Holiness always says when he does interfaith dialogue, we don't need to agree on everything in order to live together harmoniously. So the idea is we have different ideas, different ways of doing things, but that should not be what interferes with our harmony. So if we can have a broad mind and accept that there's these differences and accept some may be better, ideas may not be so good, but that we aren't our ideas and other people aren't their ideas, and that our ideas change, and similarly their ideas change. And so not to make enemies out of people just because we have different ideas. The ideas can really provoke a lot of interesting dialogue, and so we can use them, the differences in that way, for all of us to learn and grow. The problem comes in when we think my ideas are me, their ideas are them. And so we don't like the ideas, then we don't like the person. So it's always important to remember that everybody's just like us, stuck in samsara, under the influence of afflictions and karma, wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. And so with that view in mind, to recognize sentient beings overcome by their dukkha, to be like Manjushri, to see all wanderers caught in the prison of samsara, confused by the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. So if we can train our mind to see others in that way, then we won't be in conflict with them, because we'll see that the differences that often lead to conflict are just a manifestation of the afflictions and karma. They're not who the people are. They're not our nature. They're not the nature of other people. And so in that way, to keep our mind focused on the far-reaching purpose of being able to guide sentient beings out of samsara to full awakening, and therefore needing to attain full awakening ourselves first. So when we have that bodhicitta, and we know that we're never, ever, ever going to give it up, then when problems arise, we always find a way to see the problems through a Dharma viewpoint, and to bring bodhicitta and compassion into how we view any situation and every situation, so that our mind can be peaceful and our relationships with others can be as harmonious as possible. So with this motivation, then we'll share the Dharma today. So I was thinking a little bit about our discussion yesterday afternoon. Were you thinking about it too? And I always think that, different people are at different stages in their life. And according to what stage we are in our life, there's certain things that are more important to us, certain things that we need to work out or learn how to do. So I think very often, at first I started to think, okay, there's the people in their 20s and 30s, and then the 40s and 50s, and then there's then there's the rest. Yeah. And, but then I said, even between the 20s and 30s, there's a big difference, in what you have to deal with, what's going on in your life. Really big difference, because early 20s, you're just out of school, and you're not sure what you're going to do. You're trying to figure it out, okay? Unless you're one of those people who graduate on Friday and start work on Monday. But, even if you do that, sometimes you're still trying to figure out what you really want to do. But by the time you're in your 30s, you're settled into some kind of job and career, and you're starting to, you've in your early 20s, you're thinking, I need to know that I can support myself in this society, that I can be a grown-up. By the time you're in your 30s, I'm a grown-up. I can support myself, And you're also, not everybody, but you're beginning to get some rewards from your career. Maybe you've got a promotion, you got a raise, you get some praise for something or another. And you begin to see, oh yes, I can not just support myself, but I can be successful. And we've been told since we were young, by society and by our family, that we must be successful. And what is the measure of success in our society and to our families? Money, isn't it? So in your 30s, you're making some money. And then, of course, your parents are quite happy. And you feel proud of yourself, and your friends are encouraging you. Because your friends are doing the same kind of thing. And then people who are a little bit older than you are showing you how you can advance to be like them and earn more money and, climb up, whatever field you're in, climb up in status in that field, and maybe even become somebody. And so all this is kind of going on, and that's very natural, First in your 20s, then in your 30s. Then you also have the thing of raging hormones, which you thought, as we learned on the first day, over, in ancient India, over 16, you're over the hill. But, we don't let you get over the hill easy in this society. So then you have raging hormones, which you thought you left behind when you were 17, but you haven't. And, and your parents are asking about grandchildren, and you feel some pressure there. And so you're trying to figure out what am I going to do, and who am I going to be, and what areas am I going to set limits on, and what's really important. I remember one time, this was maybe about 20 years ago, Venerable Chuni at DFF. Yeah? Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, then you want to, she was leading a discussion group. Yeah.
I was leading a refuge class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so people were preparing to take refuge. And so we were examining the reasons for taking refuge over a period of weeks. And of course, that's recognizing the disadvantages and the sufferings of cyclic existence is a big piece of that study. And so I had a group of people that were not so old. Now they seem quite young, but at the time they were in their 40s and 50s.
And some in their 20s.
That's quite young. And then we had another group that were in their 20s and 30s. So they were late 20s, actually. So it was definitely two generations in that group. And it was very clear in our discussions over the course of the weeks that the people who were in their later 40s and in their 50s had been around a block more than once with relationship, with career, and it was very clear that satisfaction and happiness did not come from those things, whatever else other attachments we might have had to them. But for that group of people in their late 20s and early 30s, still, that job, just that relationship, just that person, I just haven't met the right person, I just haven't gotten far enough in my career. And so there was just a distinct difference in life experience to see that those who had been disappointed enough times by those things that society tells us will make us happy were more ready to acknowledge that this is part of the dukkha that we're trying to give up. So I could just see, we talked about this, it's just the tantalizing little ball of light hanging from the Christmas tree that if I just can reach it, then things will be okay. So it was interesting. They all took refuge, though.
Yeah. So it's different, And then, like she said, you see the people in their 40s, and then 50s, they've been there, done that. They're still in the middle of it, yeah, because they have to save for their retirement, and they have kids, and very often we don't see people, once they get in their 30s and 40s, we don't see them in the Dharma centers very much because they're very busy raising their families. And that takes a lot of time. So you're really an exception, yeah? And that's very good. You've held on to your practice. But most people that we know, there's about 20 years in there where we don't see them. Yeah. And then, you see the people who've older, so they're not looking for that kind of happiness anymore in their career, in their family. They're beginning to explore new things. But they also, depending on how they're processing things, sometimes there's a heaviness, It's like I've gotten burned by samsara and I haven't recovered. The wonderful relationship fell apart. The adorable kids, are out on their own, and some of them don't talk to me anymore. And the job where I was so successful, I've been doing that for 30 years. It's not so interesting anymore. Yeah. And so they have a whole different attitude, of what they're looking for in life, of what, the stages of development as a human being, what you're trying to do. And then as you age even more, you begin to see that, when you did the 9-point death meditation when you were 20, and the first point was death is definite, and you said, oh yes, that's very true. Oh, when you get older, you begin to say, it is true. Yeah? I remember when I first started practicing Dharma, for that, to help me in my meditations, I would often just go over the number of people I knew who had died. There were some, but not so many. I know a lot of people now who have died, and then people who are younger than me who have died. And so it begins to hit you, oh yeah, someday, they're gonna be doing a puja for me too. Or maybe they won't do a puja, they'll just, recite some prayers, but someday, that's going to happen. And it's, it's not going to be so long. Uh, and so then again, your mind shifts in terms of how you want to spend your time and what you think is important, So we go through these different stages, and it's completely natural and normal. What they always say in ancient India, your first 20 years, you're growing up and you're learning and becoming an adult. Your next 20 years, you're raising the family, you're having a career, and so on. And then after that, that's when you go do spiritual practice. Okay? So that was that, and that's what many people in India still do, after they raise their family and their career. They do spiritual practice if they haven't died before, and they do their practice for, until they die. But the Buddha said, we don't know when we're going to die. The time of death is indefinite. And, sometimes in our life we feel like I have to have that experience and learn from it. I know there's some things in my life that I had so much false conceptions about that it's like I had to do that to learn from my own experience how my own conceptions were just out of the ballpark and ridiculous. But then you think, if every single lifetime I have to do everything in samsara to learn that it has no lasting benefit, and each lifetime I have to go through and do that again, then when am I ever going to practice the Dharma? And is it ever possible to learn from other people's experiences so that I don't have to do everything myself? Yeah. So some of you, may have had friends, for example, who have substance abuse problem. So you can see from watching your friends how their life goes because of abusing substances. And you learn from their experience, and so you don't get involved in that. Yeah. Unless your attachment is really strong, and then you do get involved in it, and then maybe you learn from it, and maybe you OD. We don't know. Okay? So it just makes me think, like how can I learn the most I can from other people's experiences, so that I don't have to do everything again every lifetime. Yeah, and how can I learn the most from my own experiences, so that I can make the rest of my life beneficial. Yeah. And of course, I'm speaking from a Buddhist viewpoint. Yeah. So my goals are not to, to have a big bank account, so that when you're doing the puja after I die, that you can buy lots of pizza and chocolate, and now that the old witch is gone, have an espresso. So it's just, something to think about in all this. Like, where are we in terms of our age and what tasks we master at different age? And where are we in terms of our Dharma wisdom and learning from our experience, learning from watching other people's experience? And where, what are, at this stage in our life, what are the things that are most important to us? And to what extent do we think about the things that are important to us in this life? And to what extent do we think about what's important in terms of future lives, in terms of our spiritual practice, our spiritual goals? And, there's a shift that happens because when we're kids, we're all usually just completely, in the eight worldly concerns, and we don't know any better. Although once in a while you have kids that will say, I want to be a vegetarian, or, I want to go to the monastery or whatever, but not so often. And so, how are we always reassessing our values? Are we always checking in our lives? Am I living according to my values and principles? Or am I living on automatic and just doing what the next thing is in the life that my family and society has planned out for me? When I was my first year in college, I had a friend, and we were talking about our lives, and he's, had this plan, doing so many years of college, then I'm going to go to med school, then I'm going to do post-grad work, then I'm going to get married, then I'm going to have the family, and then this, and then I'm going to die. And he actually said it, and then at the end of that, I'm going to die. And I thought, that's not how I want to live. To have it all planned out like that, and then it just ends in death, and it's like, well, so what? What's the meaning of everything I did before death? So it's interesting. I actually wound up talking to him not too long ago, and he kind of did his whole plan, very successful in what he was, studying. I dated him, so I was thinking, I could have wound up being this guy's wife. What would that have been like? I don't want to live a pre-planned life. So, yeah. So he had fulfilled what he had set out to do. That was very good. He was happy, or at least he thought he was happy. And, yeah. But it was such a funny conversation because he was asking me questions. I mean, we're the same age. Yeah. But he's asking me questions in the same tone of voice that my parents and older relatives would ask questions in. Yeah. Do you know that tone of voice? How they ask? It's the tone of voice that says, what you're doing is really weird and I don't understand it, but I like you and I want to have a good conversation, so I'll ask you about what you're doing. Do you have conversations like that sometimes? Yeah. There's a certain, I don't know, in your family or your home culture, my home culture, there's a certain tone of voice that indicates that conversation. And here was somebody who was my age, not the age of my parents or my aunts and uncles, speaking to me like that. It was very weird. Anyway, just to share that with you as some thoughts about the discussion. And then this afternoon, we'll have the discussion. Venerable Tarpa will lead it, and we'll pose the questions to everybody. But then when the groups break up, we'll have the under 40s go together. And there's quite a number of you, and also some of the nuns, So the under 40s will have their groups, and the older 40s, will have their groups with the life support things. Okay. Is there anything anybody wants to say, or should I go on? Okay, yes. Can you remove your oxygen for a minute?
Speaking from the perspective of a 58-year-old who came to the Dharma late in life and has a pretty successful career, what I've learned is that what that success did for me is it kind of built a prison for me once I found the Dharma, in terms of my ability to have the time to practice in the way that I really want to practice. So what I'm doing now is spending my time kind of unwinding or digging out of that success to try to create a place for what's really important for me, which is Dharma. So that's what I would say from the perspective over here. I don't need oxygen quite yet, but there's still time today.
Yeah.
Going to be getting words of wisdom from us young ones. Because of our generation, the Dharma was fairly new in our world. So the elders in this community didn't meet the Dharma until they were in their 40s and 50s. Now, the advantage of that is that there is an urgency. You put on the robes, you see that. But looking back in hindsight, if I had met the Dharma when I was in my 20s and 30s, I would have the relationship would have been different to it. I think I would be, it would be more integrated. I don't know whether the sense of urgency would be the same, but I would take it to heart and have the energy to take it to heart and do the work. And I have no regrets on how my life has gone, but if I can urge you, it's that your youth is so crucial for the kind of sustenance, the kind of stability and consistency and determination and resiliency that you need to practice. And it's really, use your youth. When you get older, your mind does get clearer and smarter, but the energy is, you got to make up for that too.
Yeah. And sometimes your mind doesn't get older and clearer and smarter. It gets more trapped and more stuck in old habits, and it's more difficult to apply the Dharma.
I was remembering last night about this young fellow that's been in touch with the Abbey for about 4 years now. He's from, I think, Ohio. It's not a place that you'd easily find the Dharma, and he was starting recycling in his hometown at age 14. And he became quite a phenomena in the town. And this past year, he did his first year of university, and he's been calling me a lot just because I happen to be by the phone. And out of necessity to, keep his practice going in a very Christian college, he's there in a dorm, he started his own Dharma group. And that Dharma group has been running for the whole school year, and he'd be phoning and asking about, different things he could do and what he couldn't do. And so he really took, he took the initiative to create his Dharma group. And in addition, he has a German-sounding last name. So at one point in the year, close to Christmas, he was also running a German group. So he was doing the Dharma group and German group. And so on his dorm door, someone posted a Nazi statement. And so, the people at the university were helping him deal with this hate towards him. But he's sort of unplussed by that, and he's going ahead, and he'll run the Dharma group again this year. So, if you have the need, you have to sometimes create your own situation.
Has he been here?
Not yet.
I have also a lot of thoughts about that because I met the Dharma in my 20s and found myself alone too a lot. But I read certain books and I was thinking and working with it. And I want to share a couple of things that maybe is helpful. And I found help in that over the years and still working on that. So I was reading many in the beginning of my studies, Manjushri about how to find happiness. And he said in a later book that 15% of Americans report experiencing an intense feeling of loneliness once a week. Anyone who cuts himself or herself off from others and the universe, trapped in the bubble of his own ego, feels alone in the middle of a crowd. But those who understand the interdependence of all phenomena are not lonely. The hermit, for example, feels in harmony with the entire universe. And last year I was reading the Karmapa, his book Interconnectedness, and he's a very famous person who has a lot of people around him, but he experiences loneliness too, and he called himself sometimes his loneliness. And he fights, when you are emotionally aware of your interconnectedness, you will know you are never truly alone. He continues, loneliness is not just a result of your outer physical or social situation. If mentally or emotionally you feel alone, it does not matter how many thousands of others flock to you, as I know from personal experience. Nor is the experience of loneliness the result of a single cause or a single condition, but in numerous ones. Therefore, it cannot be completely resolved by one single cause or condition. But accepting the undeniable fact of your own interdependence and learning to work with it is a powerful condition that can help bring about a shift.
I think what comes to mind is there might need to be a balance, because I think, speaking from personal experience, being stuck in a low-paying job is also not very conducive to Dharma. So I think, there does have to be some, if you're going to live in this world, thought about career and possible profession, so that you have enough resources and aren't as vulnerable. I don't know. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, if you've chosen to live as a lay follower of the Buddha, then yes, you have certain things that you need to think about, and your own livelihood. If you have a family, the livelihood of your family. If you have kids, the education of your kids, and so on. So there are those responsibilities, and you have to. And I don't want to say you have to take care. You've chosen that way to live, and so you've chosen to have those responsibilities. And you see those responsibilities not as things that you have to do, but things that you have chosen to do, and then you bring your Dharma practice into your life as you fulfill those duties. That makes some sense? Yeah.
So I'm at the now almost 40, and I discovered the Dharma when I was 27. And, just touching briefly upon yesterday, I think I tried to jump the gun too fast, and I knew what I should do in terms of my spiritual ego, saying I want to, try to live a monastic life. I want to do this. I want to gain realizations. And it was still this ego that was not allowing sort of the process to unfold organically. And so, on one level, I think there was, a decent amount of growth spiritually, but on another, I felt like on a worldly level, I was really broken inside. And it was a really hard time. It was like on one level, my mind was very happy, and another level was very unhappy. And so I realized that my gross consciousness is still a foundation for this world. And so I really needed to attend to something and be kind to myself. And so the whole journey, I think, in my 30s was about trying to integrate. And I did do a lot of practice. Like I made a lot of prayers to Tara for guidance on that. And then I did 35 confession Buddhas, all that. And through that, just praying for integration, because I still felt like I needed to find some kind of success in a job, and I really did want a partner. And then somehow everything came together that the job is very supportive of Dharma, and my partner is very supportive of Dharma. And it led to a really good place. And I feel like I would be deeply unhappy if I just followed the spiritual path without attending to that gross level of mind and body. And, retreats like this help me really realize the extent of my delusions and how much I wish to go further on the path and not be, sort of complacent with how samsara is going at the moment, but at the same time, sort of trying to see it as a strong foundation to go deeper has been, it's been a long journey, but one that's, I think provided a lesson. So I just share that in case helpful.
I think there's also, what I was saying, attending to different things at different points in your life, and some things you have to go through to know, that you want to give them up, and other things other people don't have to go through for whatever, what they've done, their previous life karma or whatever. Okay, but what I want to touch on one thing you said about. It sounds like you were pushing yourself on a lot of ego, and there were a lot of shoulds. And I think very often when we first meet the Dharma, no matter what age we are, we can should ourselves. Yeah? And I should do this, and I should do that, and I shouldn't do this, and I shouldn't do that. And, lots of shoulds. And And I think that's a very natural stage in our Dharma path. We meet the Dharma, we change a lot, it opens the door to us, we're quite excited, yeah. And then we realize that there's a lot of stuff inside that we're quite attached to, yeah. And that we should not be so attached, but we are. And then we start shoulding. I should practice Dharma more. I should do this. I should do that. And I know for myself, I went through that. And I was even a nun at the time, But what did it for me, what shifted from I should practice to I want to practice for me, and I'm not saying this is for everybody, was I got very sick. Yeah, and I was lying in the dorm at Kopan, not the nice one, but the one they had back in the 70s, and with hepatitis, and couldn't move, and was so sick, and didn't have much money, and so on. The money didn't bother me. The sickness, it was really difficult just to get out of bed to go to the bathroom, which was down the hill in a hole in the ground with boards on top of it, on either side, It was very rudimentary conditions that we lived in. But during that time of being sick, somebody gave me the book called The Wheel of Sharp Weapons. Yeah, and I tell this story in the book Good Karma. Yeah, because I was so sick, all I could do was just lie there, and I started reading the book, and verse 9 or 10, something like that, it was talking about when you're really sick, and this is a result of your own negative karma. And I went, oh. It was at that time that the whole idea of karma really clicked. And then after that, it wasn't I should practice Dharma. It was I want to, because it became very clear to me that my illness was a result of the negative karma I had created, probably in a previous life. And it was ripening. And it was like I could blame the cook all I wanted to, and I could blame the little boys who didn't wash the vegetables well enough. Yeah, but that doesn't do any good at all, because the basic cause for my illness was my own destructive actions. So that really what shifted my mind after that, you know. So we all have our own ways of progressing, yeah. And yeah.
So I think I'm still in this should versus want dilemma. Because intellectually I know the benefits are enormous, but I still have all these habitual tendencies that drag me in the opposite direction. They're so strong. But what is helpful and what sort of helped me to make the decision to get ordained is to learn how to be really honest with myself about my experience and what I'm feeling and what actually does lead to happiness and what leads to suffering. And this was an extremely painful process. It's still very painful. So I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of self-honesty and also compassion, self-compassion. Mm-hmm. And this has forced me to grow up in a huge way. I wasn't used to relating to myself in this way. But getting deeper and really seeing the truth of the Dharma, I think there's a lot of pain involved. I mean, we have to get through the first noble truth before we get to the rest. So it's not always going to be like a walk in the park, a picnic. I mean, to really commit yourself full time to the Dharma, I think you have to be really strong inside, be really compassionate towards yourself.
Yeah.
I think that also practicing Dharma full time, you need really strong aspiration and some level of renunciation and in stable way. Last year I was here for Amitabha retreat, and that was when I was like, I don't want to work anymore. I just want to practice Dharma full time. And I thought about that. And after the retreat, I bought a ticket to go to India. Then basically, I've talked to a number of teachers I trust, and every single one of them told me to go back to get a job. And then it was kind of like a water thrown on me, because I was like, hey, I want to do this. Why are you telling me that? But I think one is I don't have a strong enough, stable aspiration or renunciation to practice full time. And the other thing is, I think a number of people told me that you have to be practical. It's like you have to be able to pay your bill. You have to be able to, you don't want to just ditch your career and have regret later. And I do think kind of going to her points, it's important to, if you're going to live in this world, it's important to be able to balance that. Mm-hmm.
When I came to the Dharma in my late teens, and I think since then it's sort of been this progressive journey of disillusionment with the world. I mean, I put so much emphasis on relationships for such a long time, and it was easy to say when something didn't work out and the person it was a really abusive relationship, it was always easy to say, well, if only I found the next person that had this or that was supportive of my practice or was nicer or whatever, it was easy to say that everything would be better. And then when I sort of met that person and realized I actually really wasn't happy even after that, that's when I think it kind of was the light bulb moment to say okay, it's not gonna be found outside myself. And I knew all along that my spiritual practice was really important, and in many ways that was sort of the dividing force. But I think even now within my career, I see all these people getting degrees, and it's alphabet soup behind their name. And it's what good is that going to do you when you're on your deathbed? Is the Lord of Death going to be like, oh, you have an MPH, PhD, MD, it's you're going to the top, and I think for me, it's definitely been sort of this disillusionment of my job is a means to an end, and I don't know, it's and it's hard, I think I'm 35, and it's even in my mid-30s, it's still kind of very lonely because everybody else around you does not hold that worldview. And I think that's why it's so important to be part of community and to connect with other Dharma friends to support that, because you're not going to find it elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the reason to really take steps and be proactive in being with the community. And it's also what she was talking about going through difficulties. It's like you also have to learn to hold your own, even though everybody around you is telling you to do something different. Yeah? Because, everybody around you will tell you to do something different. And it's so easy, especially if a lot of people tell you to do the same thing, just to do that because that's what everybody advises, and that's what happens in the world, and that's what you do, and like that. But it's also very important to really do that thing inside of, what really for me is important in my life, even if everybody else tells me I was crazy. Yeah, I mean, I met the Dharma at 24, ordained at 26. Everybody around me told me I was absolutely out of my mind. That what I was doing was just nuts. So, but I went ahead anyway. Yeah, because there was some, why I went ahead? First of all, I realized that even if I did what everybody else thought I should do, they still wouldn't be happy, and I still wouldn't be happy. Yeah. So I might please all these people, but it's not going to give any long-term happiness to anybody. But also, it was very clear to me that I don't want to die with regret. I don't want to look back on my life and say, I had this opportunity and I didn't do it. Whatever the opportunity was, I don't want to look back and say, yeah, I just went with the flow and did what was easier without really thinking about what was important. And now it's too late and I regret it. Yeah, I had a very strong feeling. I think because I had this sense growing up that my dad regretted not doing something in his life. And I thought I knew what it was. But it wasn't until after my mom died that I figured out what it was. Yeah? But regardless of what it was, I had this sense of his life like that. And I thought, I don't want to die with regret. Should we go back to Manjushri? Yeah? We got on this discussion because we were talking about the different kinds of wisdom. Yeah? And so you can see when we talk about the different kinds of wisdom that we're trying to develop through the practice, it's not some abstract thing. We're not trying to develop some abstract wisdom so that we can learn all the categories of this and all the categories of that. We're trying to understand what the Buddha taught so that it can influence our life in a positive way. Yeah, so that the meaning can really penetrate into our bones, and we can live according to that, if that's what we decide we want to do. Of course, it always depends on that. What we're attracted to, what we decide to do. Yeah. But you can see the wisdom isn't, it's not just like knowing a lot of stuff. Okay? So really important to put this into our mind, into our hearts. So here, request, and you can really request from your heart, please inspire me to generate the wisdom of debate, which courageously refutes the damaging words that express wrong ideas and misconceptions. So you can read this and think, oh, I'm, requesting to be a good debater so that some of you may have seen the Tibetan monks debate, so that I can be on the ground, and jump around and say, you guys don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 and talk at incredible speed and, and defeat all these monks and be the top of my class because I also can memorize all these texts and I can debate well. I'm going to be a geshe. So you could get that idea that that's what you're praying to do. Okay, that's not it. If you read what the wisdom of debate is about, it's not being able to be, a famous debater in the tradition. It's about courageously refuting the damaging words that express wrong ideas and misconceptions. Okay, so whose damaging words, whose misconceptions? Are we defeating somebody else's misconceptions? No, we're trying to see our own misconceptions and how poisonous they are and how out of line with reality they are. Okay? When you've done that, then you can help other people, see through their misconceptions. But the big misconceptions that we have to deal with are our own. Okay? So, yes, I talked a little bit. There's this thing of the 4 distorted conceptions, which I like to talk about. There's more than these 4. Many, many more. But these 4 give us a really a good overview. Yeah. And so the first one, as I mentioned before, is seeing impermanent things as permanent. So things that are momentary in nature, we expect to be fixed and predictable. And we like a certain amount of predictability in our life, don't we? We don't like things to be unpredictable. Yeah. But when you look around, life is pretty unpredictable. Yeah. It may seem steady, but I often think about, because I like history, and so I read about, and like I was saying before, talking to older people who've lived through things that I only read about. And you see, somebody's life is going along, and then there's some big social movement. And even though, we're ordinary people, we don't want to get caught up in that, we have no choice. Yeah. I remember after 9/11 happened, thinking, okay, this is conflict between, these people and these people, and I don't want to be in the middle of your conflict. Yeah, I want to opt out of this. But there's no choice living in this country to opt out, because by living here or by living on this planet, you're going to be influenced by it. Yeah? So, you think of how many conditions in our life are out of our control and how they could really influence us in a way that we never expected. And so, you read books. I remember I read one thing about one woman she was Chinese and was just growing up during the time of the revolution in China, around 48, 49. And she had come from a wealthy family. She was privileged, and she had a whole future in front of her. And they threw her in jail for years and years and years and years. And here was this person who had never had to deal with so much adversity, all of a sudden having huge adversity to deal with. Yeah. And so I think, we don't know what's going to happen in our lives or what's going to happen. Yeah. There's a lot of populist movements now. Yeah. It's changing a lot of things. What's going to happen regarding that? So on a global thing, how we're going to be influenced, but also on a personal thing. Yeah. One of my best friends, when I was younger, married, on top of everything. And he had a devastating motorcycle accident and was incapacitated. Like that, everything changed. So, to really look at that wrong conception. And you don't want to go from I want everything to be secure to it's not secure, so now I'm anxious. Yeah. You don't want to replace your blind feeling of security with anxiety. Because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know this could happen, that could happen, and I don't know, and how can I prepare everything, and I can get my duckies in the row, but my duckies won't stay in the row, and it's all going to fall apart, and I don't know what I'm going to do. You don't want to get there. That's not the Dharma antidote to seeing, impermanent things as permanent. Anxiety is not where you want to go, So you have to think, okay, then where is it that you really want to go? What is this feeling? How can I really accept change and instability? How can I really accept the fact that now I'm young and pretty soon I'm going to be that older generation looking at the young people. When I was young, I never imagined that I would be, and I still don't imagine. I keep having to remind myself I'm 68 because I still feel like somehow I'm beginning my life. But, so how do I really integrate that in my being so that I can live wisely, so that I can make my life meaningful?
So that anxiety is something that is a big part of my life, worrying about all sorts of things that I can't control, the world at large, things that I have zero influence over or very little. Climate change is a big one. And I look at, my kids, my son who's 17, he's thinking about what he's going to do. And he's like, Mom, I just want to live my life. But he even feels, in this whole generation of young people feel, there's no future, And that anxiety comes so strongly, and then despair and all of this stuff, So it's a huge part.
Yeah. I think that's why this long-term vision that our life isn't just what happens in this body. Yeah. So we may say in this life, like you said, there's no future. There is a future. There's always the next moment. But what I'm doing, where I'm going, isn't just about what's available to me in this lifetime. Yeah? And so that's why I think bodhicitta is so important. Yeah? Because you're looking way beyond this lifetime. And when you look through all the different lives you've had, they go this way, they go that way, but if you can hold what you value the most and hold your direction over from one life to the next, then you're not going to be knocked off balance by what's going on. And one thing that has helped me with this, when I lived in Singapore, when I first went there, I lived in a Chinese temple, and my room overlooked the columbarium. Columbarium is where they have the ashes of all the dead people. And there was one nun who had started the temple. There was the columbarium, and then she had an old folks' home for old ladies who had been, nobody supported them. They had nowhere to live. And so the nuns, and they had a whole staff taking care of these people. And I saw this nun, the head nun, of the temple and all. And she had this huge heart. It was amazing. She helped all the young people who came. She helped all these old women and so on. And I came to live there. I had been sent to live in Singapore and work at a center. And she used to say, "Oh, you're so lucky you get to study, and you know so much more than I know." And, she's 20 years older than me, or 30 years old. And, you have so much and everything. But even though she would say that to me to encourage me, she also had a very deep sense of peace and contentment in her own life. And she, she built a big Buddhist center on Lavender. And we were talking one day, because she was encouraging me to do something. And she was telling me how she raised the money for this huge center. It's one of the huge one on a prime piece of property in the middle of the city. And she said, "I just told people about, some people give $5, some people give $10, some people give $20. And just my little, this all came together, and then she built this huge thing." But what I learned from her was, her life was completely involved in working and doing social welfare projects. And this was at a time when I thought study was the most important thing. And I was really into study and meditation and formal practice. And what she kind of taught me was, in different lifetimes, you do different things. Because if you want to become a Buddha, I'm not talking about an arhat here, I'm talking about a Buddha. If you want to become a Buddha, there's such diversity of karma that you need to create. Yeah. You need to be able to relate to so many sentient beings and learn from so many different situations and figure out how to be beneficial in so many different situations, that of course you need a lot of lifetimes to create this merit, and gain this experience. So her lifetime was spent doing that. My lifetime was, at that time spent doing something else. But it made me be more content with my own life. Because at that time I was very hard on myself because I never learned Tibetan. So I couldn't ask questions in Tibetan. I couldn't read the text. My friends learned Tibetan. And I didn't. And just being with her and seeing how much good she had done in the world and how much she was able to rejoice at other people's opportunities and virtues, and that different lifetimes you do different things. So when I thought about life in that way, instead of from now until whenever death comes, then life has a totally different meaning. Then there's a big future. And there's a lot you can do. And some lifetimes there's many obstacles. I've lived in the Tibetan community. I've seen the obstacles people have faced when they've become refugees. But Dharma teaches us how to deal with obstacles and how to deal with difficulties. So, yeah, okay, this is samsara. Obstacles and difficulties are going to come. And that's what I have, when they come, that's what I have to deal with in that lifetime. But it's all for the purpose, the long-term purpose of becoming a bodhisattva and then becoming a Buddha. Yeah? So then the anxiety, you don't get anxious so much about this lifetime, because when problems come, you have a way of dealing with them. And you also have a vision of long time and all the wonderful things you're going to do as you practice in the long term. Yeah. So then you have a much more hopeful, optimistic attitude. Mm.
I have a question about the wisdom of debate.
Mm-hmm.
What could you talk about what it might look like and feel like to courageously refute damaging words that express wrong ideas and misconceptions with myself, so my own wrong ideas, and how it might look like and feel like with someone who's not Buddhist, and how it might look like and feel like with a fellow practitioner to do that.
Oh, okay. So here's where you have to couple your skillful means with your wisdom. Okay? And so how does that, what does that look like when you're with a person, let's say, who's very strong in their own religion? Yeah? What that looks like then is you pick out what they practice and what they believe in that accords with reality, and you encourage them in that. Yeah? If they're strong in their religion, you don't go and try and dismantle everything if they're not asking you questions. Yeah? If they're trying to proselytize and convert you, you say, thank you very much. I have my own faith. I respect your faith. Please respect mine. Okay? That's if they're trying to convert you. If they are asking you questions because they're sincerely interested, then you can give them the worldview. Okay, the Buddhist worldview, and talk about that. You don't necessarily do it in a debating way. Like, oh, well, you believe this and that's wrong because blah, 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 It's just you present that and, okay, here's one way to look at it. Here's another way to look at it. Think about it. You're an intelligent person. You're not trying to cram anything down somebody's throat and make them believe something. Okay? So that's how you if they're asking you questions. If they're a fellow Dharma student, yeah, who is also studying these things and thinking about them, then, you can really say, okay, but if you say that, then here's what follows, and does that make sense? And if you say this, then what about that? And there you can engage more in a where you can challenge different ideas, because you're talking with somebody who is familiar with that way of thinking and wants their ideas to be challenged. Okay? And so that's why you see the debates in the debating ground, because they've all been brought up with, this is what you do with your friends. And it's very interesting to see that even after they finish their Geshe degrees, when a bunch of them get together and start talking about a Dharma topic, they can gossip just like we do, but when they talk about a Dharma topic, they'll, it's like, well, you can say this, but you can also look at it this way, but this doesn't hold and that refutes it, and so said this, but if you believe that, then this and that. And they love it, because this is just what how they were raised and schooled, and they learn from each other in that way. So it really depends who you're talking to and what their mentality is. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what's coming up personally with the wisdom of debate with myself is when I'm somewhere like a restaurant, I have this attitude of I deserve good service. And I get pretty irritated if I don't get it. And so I could use this to help tone that down.
Yeah.
Because I can be kind of nasty to people.
Yeah. And so that's really the meaning of practicing the Dharma. When you take what you hear and you use it to apply to your own mind so that your own mind changes. Yeah. That's what real Dharma practice is.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you could go over the visualization for the Wheels of Swords for this request.
Okay. Yeah. Get them away from me. In the self-generation practice, the visualization is a bit different when you manifest yourself as you think that your wisdom becomes Manjushri. Then at your heart, on the moon disk, there's this wheel of swords. Yeah, and it's 6 swords, and there's one sword that sticks up here, and then there's a whole visualization you do with that. Okay, so it's just it's 6 swords in a circle. All the hilts are at the center, and the points are at the edge, and you think. That you can visualize it rotating, but I think it's not so good to do that too much. But the idea is you have all these swords that are cutting all the wrong views.
Is each sword one of the syllables, and then the one pointing up is the D?
Each sword is a sword, and then on top of each, a little bit above each sword on the point is one of the syllables. And then the sword in the middle that goes upright, just above the hilt, there you have a D.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.